Good afternoon and welcome to Wagely's second meetup. Can financial wellness be the key to worker retention? Thank you all for taking the time to participate in our online session this afternoon. Wagely Financial Wellness Meetup, our Wagely's signature meetup, also of its own kind in Bangladesh, that raises important topics and starts conversations related to financial well-being. My name is Sanjita Tani, the lead of Community and Communications at Wagely Bangladesh, and this afternoon I will accompany you all through the course of today's online meetup. In our last meetup, we discussed the well-being of workers in Bangladeshi RMG industry in the presence of panelists all the way from Asian Development Bank Bangladesh, the Asia Group of Companies, SQ Group, and the Asia Foundation Bangladesh. In Wagely's second meetup, we will focus on the correlation between financial wellness and worker migration, while trying to get a deeper look into defining what we mean by financial wellness. Throughout this session, we will share industry insights, specifically in the RMG industry, from our speakers about their take on the topic that we have to discuss today. Before we begin, I would like to let all our participants know that you can place your questions to our panelists during the panel discussion in the Q&A box below your screen, and we will be picking up the questions during the Q&A session. Before we jump into the session, I would like to invite our CEO and co-founder, Tobias Fischer, to do the opening of our Financial Wellness Meetup 2.0. Can financial wellness be the key to worker retention? Tobias, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanjita. Thanks, guest speakers, for making time today to join on our second webinar. Wagely's meetups are meant to share insights about Wagely from the ground, what we've learned over the course of the last couple of months and the community that we're servicing. Over the last 12 months, we've learned a lot, especially on worker migration being a very critical and crucial topic that needs to be talked about, especially in the RMG sector. Hence, this webinar addresses the issue, the impact of worker migration, and what can be done in order to reduce and mitigate worker migration in order to solve for cost reduction for RMG businesses in Bangladesh. What we have observed for quite some while is that workers do migrate, even sometimes for very small amounts in salary increases. They tend to value a financial wellness solution more than oftentimes being paid more at different factories in Bangladesh. Some of our clients have also mentioned that they have seen workers coming back to their factories because Wagely is available only at their factories, which is a strong indication that financial wellness and initiatives driven by the employer can significantly help not only workers, but also help businesses reduce cost over time. In today's discussion, we are very excited to have some of the largest and leading RMG factories participating and sharing their experiences on worker migration, the impact and insights they have gained from offering Wagely to their workers, and how Wagely benefits not only the workers, but ultimately the bottom line of each of their businesses. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Amrita, our interim country manager in Bangladesh, who will be the moderator for this session. And over to you, Amrita. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Sanjita. And thank you to our guests for being here. I think before we go to the panel discussion, we actually want to share some of our findings. I think someone is sharing the slides. Let's wait till those slides come up. All right, so yeah, and even before we get into our study, I think we want to take a step back and really understand what is financial wellness. How do we define it? This was a lot of the topic of our first meetup a few months ago. But just to recap for everyone, when we say financial wellness at Wagely, we're talking about looking at someone's holistic financial life, looking at all of the pieces of their financial life, rather than just financial inclusion. Holistic financial health means, for workers especially, the ability to understand their earnings and meet their short-term cash flow needs. Wagely's solution, Earned Wage Access, actually provides workers the ability to access their already earned wages before payday, which means, let's say today is September 10th, workers have worked 10 days of the month. They have access to those 10 days of earnings rather than waiting for the end of the month. So if someone has a short-term cash need, such as an emergency, they may have been in a car accident, there may have some medical issue, they actually, instead of going to a predatory lender who may charge them really high interest rates and be the beginning of a very harmful debt cycle, they actually can access their wages, which they've already earned, to pay for those emergency expenses. And this can be really helpful in preventing that debt cycle. So we strongly believe that this Earned Wage Access product improves workers' financial wellness, and that financial wellness improves worker well-being, and in turn, that actually makes the lives of employers or factory owners much easier because it reduces worker migration, improves productivity, along with a whole other host of benefits. So with that definition cleared up, why don't we go ahead and jump into our findings? Great. So this is a little bit of a summary of what we found. We worked with 3 factories that we've been working with for a long time, since 2021, to track their data. We tracked data relating to worker migration as well as usage of our app. And what we found is that there is a really strong correlation between worker migration, reduced worker migration, and using Wagely's Earned Wage Access product. There's a common misconception, and I think Toby mentioned this as well, that if workers are able to actually access their wages before payday, they'll be more likely to migrate. But this is totally a misconception. What our data shows is exactly the opposite. When factories use Wagely, their workers are more likely to stay. You can see that in each factory here, we worked with ICC, and you'll hear more from Mehrab later, Triple Apparels, and SQ Group. We tracked data about their migration rates before launching Wagely, which respectively were 17%, 19%, and 5%. SQ started off really low already, but after they implemented Wagely, all of their migration rates actually reduced, anywhere between 18% at SQ, all the way up to 57% at ICC. This is an incredible insight, and you can see that each factory, and we'll go into each factory in just a minute, but this can be hugely impactful, not just for the workers, but for the factories themselves in terms of managing their own like worker migration policies. Let us jump into the details and go factory by factory to see what's going on here. Can we, yeah. So first we'll take a look at ICC. So what you see here are 2 lines, worker migration rate. This basically means of all workers, what percentage are leaving the factory every month? That's the pink line that you see. The blue line is Wagely users. So this is basically how many workers are using Wagely out of registered users today. And that number is increasing over time. As that number increases from Wagely's launch in November of 2021, worker migration rate has significantly dropped. You'll see on the right side some of the numbers. From November of 2021 to February of 2022, there was an average of 17% worker migration. In the last 4 months, we see that rate has dropped to 7.5%. And today, it's September already, but in June, that rate was less than 5%. That's incredible impact and almost 60% improvement in migration. Let's move on to the next one. You'll hear more from Mehrab later. At Triple Apparels, we see a similar trend. We see migration rates were really high, above 20% back in January, February of this year. Once launching Wagely in March of this year, those migration rates dropped dramatically as workers increased. You see kind of something funny going on in May. This is actually due to the first Eid holiday. And so workers were paid a bonus, maybe they didn't use the Wagely product as much, but we still saw a lot of worker migration. And so that's a clear indicator that using Wagely, which, you know, workers went back to using Wagely again in June. Once workers used Wagely again, that migration rate dropped. This drop correlation is apparent here at Triple Apparels, which saw a 23% improvement in migration. Let's go to the last one, SQ Group. So at SQ Group, as I mentioned, the worker migration rate was already low at 5%. But once Wagely launched in August of last year, that 5% actually reduced by 20% to 4%. So that's showing that even at a factory that already has a low migration rate, there is still significant impact from Wagely. I think another point to note here is that SQ had a certain number of people that they had dedicated to worker acquisition and retention efforts. And after implementing Wagely, they were actually able to significantly reduce that workforce that focused on retaining talent. So even for SQ Group, there has been a huge impact. So, we've shared 3 companies with you, 3 RMG factories that are quite well known in the industry. I think most of the audience must know who they are. And we've been tracking with these folks because they've been onboarded with Wagely for a few months, and we have data to be able to share. But as we continue onboarding more factories, we're going to continue monitoring this data very closely to ensure that we're having this very positive impact on reduced worker migration for all factories. Sanjita, that's it for this presentation.
Thank you, Amrita, for those insights. As we just saw, these were the statistics of migration from factories where Wagely was able to play a role in reducing the rate of migration. But now let's hear it from the factory owners themselves on their view. Moving on to our panel discussion, I would like to welcome our panelist, Mr. Humayun Salim, Managing Director at Khantex Fashions Limited, Mr. Mehrab Al Shaheen, Director at International Classic Composite, and Mr. Ashaab Hassan, Project Coordinator at Giant Group, Bangladesh.
Thank you, Sanjita, for that kind introduction. I'm back. Welcome to our panelists as well for joining us today. Very excited to have all 3 of you here, Mr. Humayun, Ashaab, and Mehrab. We're going to be talking about, again, the issue of worker migration in RMG's factories and how financial wellness can actually help to reduce this migration, building on the data that we just saw before. For our audience's understanding, we have been working with ICC and Mehrab since the end of 2021, Khantex and Mr. Humayun for the last 2 months, and we'll soon be going live with Giant Group and Ashaab very soon. So I want to jump in and start by talking about the migration problem, especially for those in the audience who may be less familiar with the RMG industry. So first, Mr. Humayun, I'd like to start with you. You're an RMG industry veteran, and the topic of worker migration has been a matter of discussion for a long time now. Could you tell us a little bit about why this issue came to be? Has it been around for a long time? Is it a recent phenomenon? And how do you think about the issue of worker migration in the context of Khantex?
Thank you, Wesley, for inviting me, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody is fine. So, yes, first of all, the worker migration. This is the trend of especially the RMG workers, because there are a lot of opportunities nearby different factories, or they have a lot of other options in different kind of industries, or they have a lot of things to do in the village area. So they have earned some money, so they want to do their own business. So there are a lot of reasons behind this worker migration, and there are few expansion also in the similar industry. So they need more workers. So they're also attractive in different packages, different facilities. So they jump there. So there are lots of varieties of reason behind. So, but thanks to Wesley, because we introduce ourselves and then they explain this facility for the workers in between before salary or maybe when they required. So it's really helpful. It's very early to comments for us because just we have started last 2-3 months. So we don't have exact data from the workers. We need some more times. So, but today also I went to factory and I have discussed several peoples about the Wesley. So especially the workers, they are really happy because as you know, we pay every next month, let's say 7th working days in the following months. So before that, they need money in different kind of reason, maybe some illness, maybe they need to some money to the villages, or they have some spend before. So they are required in between, they need some money. So normally they beg to other people, they request other different kind of financial institutes. So they charge very high. So it's very difficult for them to accommodate. But Wesley is giving them the access, their earned money. So it's very easy for them and there is no cost for them. So it's really helpful for them. So I think it's a very good idea. So we have to work on this very closely and let's see. I mean, we need some more times to understand what is the reality, but it's very good. I mean, thank you, Wesley, to introduce this kind of facility for our RMG industry. So really it will be helpful for our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humayun. I want to understand, I think the implementing the Wagely solution has clearly been beneficial for you and your workers. Can you tell us a little bit like why, before implementing Wagely, why would workers migrate in the first place? And Mehrab, Ashaab, feel free to hop in here as well. I think I really want to understand, you know, what was going on in the industry, in the macro environment, at the factory level even, that caused workers to migrate in the first place.
Sorry, you are, yeah.
Yeah, the question is, why do workers migrate in the first place?
A question for whom? Me? For me? Or...
Yeah, you can start, Mr. Humayun. Please feel free to start.
Yeah. As I said, there are a lot of reasons behind. I mean, because of this RMG industry, so there are a lot of expansion in the existing factories. And as I said, there are a lot of reasons behind for this migration. So they have a lot of opportunities nearby factories, or they have earned some money because this industry is almost 40 years old. So there are workers like they're working for 30 years, 40 years. So they made some money and now they want to do their own business in their village or different kind of areas. So then they are living, or it's one sort of retirement. So especially the old operator, the experienced operator, they're leaving their villages or they do want to some business in different areas. So there are a lot of reasons behind, and even some of the operators or workers, they get very little amount of money, additional money, maybe 100 taka, 200 taka. So they want to switch. So there are a lot of reasons behind, as I say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mehrab, did you want to get in there?
Yeah, if I may add something to that, like Mr. Humayun did mention, so some of these workers who have been working for many years, say 10, 15, some even for 20 plus years. So it's just a matter of time until they save up enough for what they were intending to do with that saving. So it's just a matter of time until they have enough of that saving in order to invest or even move back to the villages. Just like, you know, people, decentralization, they come into the city for a period of time. And then once they've made an amount of savings that they can actually go back to the village and do something themselves, most choose to do that. And other than that, if you actually monitor some of the migration trends, you will see even in the charts that it's mostly around the holiday season. So for example, for Bangladesh, it's going to be the two Eids. So what happens is most migration takes place during these Eid holidays. They receive their salaries and bonuses and other benefits. And they use that to buy some time at times to weigh out other options, because they have their salary and their bonuses or something to live on for the next coming weeks or months while they look for other options. Most move on to other areas, and out of those, many struggle to even land jobs, while some even return back. So I guess it's just about the amount of money they have at their disposal at that time and what they can do with it. So it's mostly about weighing out their options.
Got it. And that makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of factors at play here. Maybe Ashaab, would love your view. Do you see that there are particular types of profiles of workers or segments of workers who tend to migrate and switch more often?
Generally, let's say for my factory, it's usually the ones that are new employees. So it's between like people who are there between 1 to 6 months, 8 months. It's either those people that are moving more often, or like both Mr. Humayun and Mr. Mehrab mentioned, the older, the ones who are looking at retirement. So you have those, mainly those kinds that the young and new one who are just looking for opportunities where any kind of pay raise will make them consider to move jobs. And also, I think generally the culture and the mindset of the workers have changed. I think previous generations, it was more like they look for comfort and the stability. Now it's just with so much ample opportunity all over the place, they're trying to take any benefit they can with any pay raise, because regardless, they're getting a yearly increment, but that's once a year from when they're joining. So if they can get opportunities to raise their salaries before that, they are taking that opportunity.
Got it. Understand. Thank you all for your responses. I want to ask another question actually to all of you, which is, of course, workers are migrating for a variety of reasons, but what about you? What does that mean at an employer level, an RMG factory owner level? What does it mean for you as owners and managing your staff? What kind of problems does it cause for your team? Mr. Humayun, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Sorry, what did you say? I didn't follow.
So we understand why workers may want to migrate, but for your team at Khantex, what kind of problems does it create for your team internally when workers decide to migrate?
As I said, we are in the same industry, so the reason is common for all of us, because the industry colleague, especially the RMG businessman colleague, we sit together, we discuss ourselves in between. So we try to find out what is the reason behind this migration. Especially my colleague said before, he said, like, there are two different Eid, the festival Eid, and they get 2 bonus. So especially the last Eid, when they get more bonus, then they go to village and they have enough money, so they don't want to come back, because they think they want to spend first and then they will look for different opportunities. So basically the 2 Eid, especially the last Eid, Eid al-Adha, so there are a lot of migration, because they go to village, they stay long time, 2-3 months, and then they come back, maybe then they get also different opportunities. So that is as I said, I mean, not a particular reason behind for our industry, because this is a common, because for the whole RMG, Bangladesh RMG industries, the reason is almost similar for all of our factories.
If I could add, so some of the impacts I would think is like the main thing, we work with volume, so efficiency. Anytime a worker leaves, we work in the line system. So if there's one who's missing in that line, it has an impact and it has an impact throughout the line. And then so whatever that causes, like a bottleneck, which in the bigger picture causes overall efficiency problems. And then in terms of planning, because it's such a fluctuating number that we're having migration, we have set targets that we try to forecast the trend, but we're never sure. So that affects the planning that we have generally. And in terms of even in RMG, or let's say for knit, for us in specific, there are different skill sets that each operator or each worker would have, and we have to plan based on those skill sets. And so when they leave, it becomes an issue of trying to balance the whole planning. So I think in the last few months, especially post-COVID, like the first, let's say after the second wave, there was an influx of orders and influx of demand of workers, during which time there was crazy amount of migration. And so you would see absurd numbers in the last year and a half to 2 years, where migration levels were hitting over 17, 20, 25%. And everyone had ample orders, but most people struggled with planning because no one could specifically hit on the target they wanted to in terms of worker retention.
Wow, Ashaab, so it sounds like there's like a micro issue, which on the line itself, that whole line could be disrupted when even one worker probably leaves. But then in terms of managing the output for the entire factory, it's also quite problematic because it's hard to manage, especially when many workers are leaving at the same time. Maybe if it's 1 or 2 workers here or there, it's easier to manage. But when you have many leaving at the same time, it becomes really difficult for you to plan and manage the orders that are coming in, manage your timelines. That sounds extremely challenging. Mehrab, do you have a view on this as well?
I just had a little bit to add, which falls very closely to what Mr. Ashaab just said, which is once a worker leaves, and you can obviously replace that worker with another worker, but that worker had been trained with certain operations. So you lose out even further more on efficiency, because whoever is replacing this person has to be trained all over again from the start. So that just decreases and reduces efficiency a little further than just the migration itself.
Wow, got it. That sounds really challenging. Are there any other challenges that it creates, either for your factory or for any of your external stakeholders, maybe even your customers or your suppliers?
Yes, we obviously face a lot of issues trying to explain to them about the whole migration thing, because obviously different cultures, different countries. So it's very hard for them to grasp the idea of this ongoing migration and why it's continuously happening every year.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. As someone who's worked in a lot of other parts of Asia, as I've been learning about Bangladesh, I've also found this worker migration issue to be something very unique to Bangladesh and to the RMG sector in particular. And it's a really interesting problem, and I think we want to explore all the ways in which Wagely can help solve it. And then actually, I kind of want to turn our attention actually to the Wagely solution and earned wage access as a concept. So, I shared earlier, earned wage access, allowing workers to access their already accrued or earned wages, is something that Wagely offers, and we are in various stages of implementation with each of your 3 factories. Mehrab, we'll go to you first, since you've been one of Wagely's oldest clients in Bangladesh. When you were thinking about onboarding Wagely and using it as a solution for worker migration or worker well-being, how did you think about it? This is at a time when Wagely was very early in the country, and you said, I'm going to go ahead and onboard Wagely. Tell us what your thought process was like and why you decided to actually use Wagely as a solution, either for the worker migration problem or some other solution.
So when Ramiz initially approached me with the concept of Wagely, trying to even ask me that if this was even going to work in Bangladesh at that point, I remember this was way early back in the day, early last year. I wasn't even thinking about Wagely as an employer or like as an owner of one of these companies. I wasn't even looking at it as that aspect. I just heard about the concept and I thought that this will help our people. Our people need this. I wasn't even thinking about who could need this. It could be RMG sector, it could be in the construction, it could be in the brick fields, it could have been anywhere. But I thought the concept would help and benefit, especially a developing country like Bangladesh and people who don't have access to funds or who don't have really like much in savings. So like sudden emergencies, which is what Wagely is essentially for. It's for emergencies. So that was a sector that no one was really accommodating, that these people may have emergencies. And suppose you helped one out, you can't really, and then it can easily spiral in round trickly way that, you know, you help someone out, the other person goes like, hey, you helped him, why don't you help me out as well? But as an employer, you can only help so many people at once until it's the end of the month. So the fact that he explained the concept so well, and I was sold on day one that I believe in this, and I hope this arrives into our country and thrives as well.
Got it, Mehrab. Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you for being one of our earliest supporters. Mr. Humayun, let's hear a little bit about your experience onboarding Wagely tier workers. As you said, we've been working together 2 or 3 months. Why did you want your workers to have access to Wagely, and what was your experience working with the Wagely team?
Yeah, thank you. You know, there are thousands of workers. So for us, it's very difficult to manage to give them some loan or advance or whatever. So it's very difficult for us, and we don't have that kind of mechanism also, and we don't have that kind of cash flow also. Is you know, is very, very true. So when Wesley explained us this way, the worker will be benefited, and you also will be benefited indirectly. Your work will be smoothly, something like that. Then I think this is the good option for us and for workers also, and this for industry also, not only in our RMG, because there are lots of growing industry in Bangladesh, big industries coming up in Bangladesh. So even Wesley can also help them. So it will grow our country. It will grow our industry in Bangladesh. So that's why we have decided to work with Wesley, and really we are thankful to Wesley. And I think I will request also some of our industry friend colleagues will explain them what is the benefit for them and for country, and as well as especially for the workers. So already I have started recommending my industry colleagues, friend, because they are keep calling me because they know already I have started this facility with you. So already last 2 months, there are a lot of call from different kind of people in similar industry because they know me. So we are also discussing. So I think they need this kind of help from you. So it's really helpful for our country. Thank you, Wesley. I really appreciate your effort.
Thank you, Mr. Humayun. I think we also likewise really appreciate your efforts to spread the word about Wagely and onboard the folks that you know, because you know that it's a good solution for them and for their workers. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's been like so far working with the Wagely team?
It's fantastic. I mean, really, they are very helpful there because we have decided, and within 2-3 days we have done everything. The contract, I mean, everything, all the process. It was very fast because your dedicated team was helpful for us. So they train every department. So it was fantastic. I mean, really, they are helpful. They are very efficient. We are happy with them.
That's great to hear, Mr. Humayun. I think our team would be very happy to hear that feedback as well.
I would like to add one more thing. Because the mechanism, when I heard from Wesley, I thought it will be very difficult to implement. So I was very worried. I don't know how to start with. So I was sitting with my team, and I was telling them that you have to learn carefully and you have to understand carefully, because I think this is a bit more difficult. So when they started, and after 2-3 days, I got the report from factory. Everything has been done within 2-3 days, and everybody got paid, and they are happy. So then I think it's very easy. But before that, I was thinking it's very difficult. But it was very easy only because of your team, because they trained up our team very well. So I appreciate your team. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Mr. Humayun. Thank you for saying that. I think one of the things that we do pride ourselves in is that getting Wagely up and running is a very easy for our side, very easy for your side, and we can do it in the matter of just a few days. I think, Mr. Ashaab, I want to turn our attention to you and Giant, because you're going to be onboarding Wagely very soon. And
Yeah.
I'd like to know what you're most excited about working with Wagely. Why did you decide to work with Wagely? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about the process with your internal stakeholders to actually onboard Wagely.
So it's basically, I would say Mr. Mehrab was one of the key people who helped convince me to get on board with Wagely. So I've been in the process talking to Wagely for a while now as well. The first one was like how it would benefit us. Recently, we've been facing a lot of migration issues generally, and increased migration issues in the last few months. And so I think that was a key part in trying to make this decision. And also the idea of digitizing the whole industry, and with how through COVID, how we quickly adapted to some of the changes that was brought into the industry, where it be electronic payment systems and other platforms coming into the industry, and how that will help us move forward. And especially earned wage access is something that has been talked about before, but not implemented by anyone. So I think this was a good opportunity for us. In terms of stakeholders, so I had to present to the board, try to convince them, and also present some arguments with information that you guys have provided, and along with Mr. Mehrab. So I think it wasn't too difficult. But like Mr. Humayun said, I'm still not skeptical, but like the process of onboarding it is always a complication, because it's very easy to get misinformed, especially at that level. And word spreads like fire. You get one wrong sentence, and the whole concept could be misunderstood. So normally I try to be as careful as possible in terms of mass implementation, but I'm looking forward to hopefully onboarding it within next month.
Amazing. Thanks, Ashaab. We're also looking forward to working with you and onboarding Wagely at Giant Group very soon. I'll go back to Mr. Mehrab for the last last question in this part of the discussion on Wagely as a solution to the worker migration problem. But Mehrab, you've been a customer of Wagely. You've been working with us again for months now. Obviously, there were many reasons you wanted to work with us, and we appreciate your loyalty for this long. But you've also had time to see the impact of Wagely at work, both with your workers and with your internal staff and managing the worker migration issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How has Wagely actually helped your workers and your team?
So with the inclusion of and services of Wagely, many workers have actually expressed their happiness and gratitude about the fact that they no longer need to request relatives or friends for short-term or quick loans. So not only do they end up paying some type of interest, but the feeling of being able to arrange it from within their own company is far greater than approaching a relative or an external source. It's also a matter of pride if you can actually tell people that, no, I got the help from my company or from within the company, or Wagely helped me out. So it is also a matter of pride, like you can actually boast about it. They're also feeling more valued, as this practice is not too common in our country, or it hasn't been. We've actually heard complaints, this was a couple of years before Wagely, about female workers struggling to keep their wages from their husbands or in-laws. Wagely's model actually allows them to claim the right to their earned wages without having to wait for the last day when these predators are, on the prowl.
Wow,
So they've expressed great amounts of gratitude for providing this. So which actually on our part was nothing, because it's actually like Wagely just came to us and you guys wanted to do this for the workers themselves. So we just worked as like a middleman to make sure that they get the service that you're providing. But the way that gratitude was expressed, that, we're so happy that you've given this. Doesn't really matter whether they actually register or access their wages that way. The fact that it was presented to them holds great value as well.
Mehrab, thank you. That's a really helpful visual of, you know, the actual impact that Wagely is having on the ground with the workers. Has there been impact for your team? And I guess you as a factory owner, like how are you, how has this impacted your ability to, you know, remove some of those blockages that we talked about earlier, managing some of those external stakeholders?
Like Mr. Ashaab and Mr. Humayun said, I could actually relate to some of the things they said, because when initially back in November, when I was trying to pitch it to the rest of the management at ICCL, I felt a strong resistance, because obviously onboarding something like this requires some kind of change, and people often feel resistant to change, but it is inevitable. So you have to adapt. So it took a bit of a push, but managed to convince them that this will actually benefit us, not just the employees or the workers, but us in the long run as well, in terms of retaining and increasing efficiency.
Got it. Thank you. I want to zoom out a little bit now. I mean, thank you for all of you know, the responses to the impact of Wagely on factory workers and your various stakeholders. But I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about, again, the concept of financial well-being, and how does this fit into your broader agenda or broader programs around worker well-being, not just financial, but holistic well-being. Maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's you know, conditions in the factory. How does financial wellness fit into that? This is a question for all of you, so whoever wants to take it first.
I can start. So I think the financial well-being aspect is a big stress in most of the workers' lives. And I think to be able to have access to some of the earned wage, which is what we're talking about, and know that they might be able to access it in terms of when they need it before the end of the month, would give them some comfort, and that would ease their day-to-day lives in some aspect and reduce some of the stress. It won't get rid of the whole financial burden, but it will impact, even if a little bit. So I think that helps in terms of just their holistic wellness and their stress in their day-to-day life.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ashaab. Mr. Humayun, do you have a view? How does financial well-being fit into broader worker well-being?
Yes, I said, like, there are a lot of workers. I mean, they need a lot of helps in the middle of the month or maybe end of the month, especially after 20th. They need, because we pay following next week of the following month. So after 20th, they need some financial help because of the different kind of reason. So they go to different places. It's very difficult for them to manage, and it's very costly. So when they can access this their earned amount easily by themselves, so it's very easy for them. So, and it's very stress-free for them also. So it's benefited for them also, and it's benefited for our industry also, because they can work freely, so without any hesitation, so they can work. So it's really helpful for both of us. So it's very good program. Thank you.
Great. So, Mr. Humayun, you know, it's actually come up a few times that Khantex has actually implemented quite a few worker well-being programs. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those other programs beyond Wagely that you've actually implemented in your factory?
Yeah, because there are a lot of things. As I said, I mean, the whole industry is following almost the similar thing, benefited, like the attendance bonus, the production incentive, so medical facility, transport facility, timely increment, and then the upgradation increment also, because middle of the year also we do a lot of upgradation, the working upgradation, so they get increment also. And then there are a lot of because we support in different way for their children, for their families, different packages also we have. So the similar, like the whole industry is following the similar thing, so we are also following. So we do a lot of things for the workers to retain them, to train them, to motivate them. So end of the day, they are also benefited. We are also benefited as a whole industry. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Mehrab, what about you? Anything at ICC, any other specific worker well-being programs that your team has been able to implement?
Like Mr. Humayun had mentioned, so timely increments, transportation, daycare for the kids. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing like you mentioned. I don't know where his factory is based, but we often survey around neighboring factories to see what they're also providing, and we try to accommodate just to make sure that there's no kind of inertia going on between workers from different factories when they discuss. So we try to accommodate with every aspect that we can in order to make sure that they feel motivated.
Got it. That's great. We're glad that Wagely can fit into that. When it comes to financial wellness, another really important factor is actually financial literacy. And that's something that Wagely does in our part through our application, through our kiosks. How do you think about worker financial literacy? Are there any specific programs that you're implementing, especially if there are programs that are across the industry that many factories are implementing? How do you think about financial literacy in the context of worker wellness?
So financial literacy or consultancy must be addressed and explained to sustain employees' financial stability, I guess. And with the access to earned wages, which is, like I mentioned, it's a very new practice in our country and it's quite unfamiliar to many. Some may actually tend to go overboard with their spendings and struggle to make ends meet at the end of the month. So I feel like it should be addressed and explained to them on how they can manage it better.
Got it. What about you, Mr. Humayun? How do you think about financial literacy when it comes to worker wellness? How important is it in their lives?
It's very important for all of us, not only for workers.
Agreed.
It's very important for our whole life. So definitely, and especially for workers who aren't very certain amount of money and they have a lot of different expenditure for their family, for their kids, for themselves. So it's really, it's very important for all of us. So that's how Wellness can help them directly. So it's really helpful for all of us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think we've covered a lot today, but we've talked about the worker migration problem. We've talked about how Wagely and earned wage access can be a solution, and how financial wellness actually fits into these broader industry level programs that are going into improving financial wellness. I also see that Ashaab has lost his power. So unfortunately, I think it may take him a few minutes to join us. But maybe for the two of you, Mr. Mehrab, Mr. Humayun, I do have one last question, and then we can open the floor to questions from the audience. Mehrab, again, you've been a Wagely user for many months now. Mr. Humayun, you're recently joined the Wagely family. What are you most excited about in the coming months working with Wagely as your financial wellness partner?
I'll let Mr. Humayun take the floor.
Yeah, as I said, just we have started, so we have to work with them very closely with Wagely and the workers and the whole team. So end of the day, we have to see how much we can benefit it for all of us. So we are really excited to see the result, but we need some time to understand the whole mechanism, and we have to see the output. So we need some more times. Maybe the next meeting we can discuss more. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Mr. Mehrab, what about you?
So basically, fintech like Wagely can definitely help tackle the migration issues in the RMG sector through the right implementations. With technology coming into the sector, the opportunities are actually endless to accommodate employers and employees with services and benefits. Basically a synthesis that would ultimately establish a well-oiled machine. But it is something, and like Mr. Humayun said, this is data-driven, so a lot of data needs to be collected, analyzed in order to comment even further on how far this can go, but definitely there's only one direction this can go, and that's up.
Amazing. What a great note to end on, Mr. Mehrab. Mr. Mehrab, Mr. Humayun, thank you very much for this discussion. I do want to open the floor to some questions from the audience, and I think we received a few during the discussion. So let me start with those. And to our audience, please go ahead and submit more in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many as we can. So reading some of the audience questions, let's see. Do you think Wagely can add more values with some other features like insurance or medical? So I think is beyond earned wage access. What else would you like to see from Wagely as we continue our partnership? And I think maybe we can divide this into two buckets. What else would you like to see for the workers, and what else would you like to see, you know, as factory owners that can help your team?
I guess primarily I would like for more awareness, just to say educate them more on this whole concept, because like Mr. Ashaab had mentioned earlier, that words can spread like wildfire. So just if it goes through the right authority and explained the right way, I feel like it'll be a little more solid, because right now, even after going and speaking to some of the employees at our factory, I've come to know that some of them are still a bit confused or iffy about whether to take money out. They don't know what might happen later. So there's still some kind of a fear or confusion of some sort. And Wagely have tried their best. So I guess it's just the employees, because they're not accustomed or used to something like this, it's just going to take a little bit more time to get them to be more comfortable with it. But they do feel like they need it. They know they need it. They just don't know how to take that step.
Got it. So helping them get over that initial perhaps fear, perhaps anxiety about taking the leap. Yeah, that is definitely something we can continue working on together.
Yes.
Absolutely. Mr. Humayun, what about you? What else do you think Wagely can offer either to your factory workers or to your RMG factory team itself?
Yes, already you are doing. I mean, there are a lot of awareness training. So since just we have started, so we need to learn more, and we need to aware our workers more. So still, because this is a totally new system for all of us, so we need to aware them. So we need some time to understand more benefited for both of us. So we'll have to observe a few more months.
Got it. That's great. I have a couple questions to the. I have a couple questions from the audience that I can add. Actually, a couple of them are for Wagely. So one is there any study to correlate migration is higher in factories with less financial wellness? Thank you for that question. I think I can answer this. The answer is basically that we don't have enough data at this point. I mean, we obviously have the data that we shared earlier to correlate factories have lower migration with organizations that are using Wagely. But the opposite, to see is to measure actually financial wellness is another thing that Wagely is working on. How do we quantify someone's financial health? What does that look like? That's actually an initiative that Wagely is already doing. We actually already have a financial health survey that is accessible within our app and our kiosk. So workers can avail that, but again, we need more data. We need to see and track that across factories, and then also track that along with the migration data. So maybe that'll be the topic for a future financial wellness meetup, but that's definitely an area that we want to continue tracking. Thank you for that question. Let me quick see what are the other questions we have here. There's a question, how does this opportunity prevent workers' migration? I think we talked a lot about that, but Mr. Mehrab, Mr. Humayun, is there anything you want to add to that? How does the opportunity prevent worker migration?
I guess we've covered most of it, but yeah, this will definitely prevent worker migration, because at the end of the day, offering Wagely is kind of like representing the workers as well. And they'll definitely stay in any place for longer if they feel represented, like if they feel that representation. Humans in general feel the need to belong, whether that is within family, friends, classroom, or workplace. So giving them that feeling that they belong and we're here to look after, like make sure that they get what they have earned or what they deserve, that will definitely help to retain or to motivate
Got it.
workers.
Thank you, Mr. Mehrab. I think last question I'm seeing, if there are any others for the audience, please write them in now. But the last one I'm seeing is, again, a question to Wagely. To whom is Wagely charging the flat membership fee, to the employer or to the employee? If it is for the employer, what is the annual membership fee? So right now it's a flat fee. And it's generally to the employee. There is actually a choice here. If an employer would like to take over the fee themselves, they have the option to do so. But in most cases, especially since we are proving that earned wage access actually reduces worker migration, the workers are paying that flat fee. And we're trying to keep it as low as possible. We're just covering our costs. But there are instances we've seen with some employers where they say this is a really amazing benefit for our workers and are actually willing to pay for it themselves. We will be, given that request, we may be coming up with some new pricing models in the near future, but that's something to stay tuned for. And again, maybe the topic for another financial wellness meetup.
Also, maybe to quickly chip in, this is Tobias speaking. Also, Amrita, thanks for sharing the answer. I just wanted to make it specific also for the panelists as well as some of the guests here. So as Amrita mentioned, in a lot of cases, the employee is paying for it, but we have very specific examples where the employer is paying it. We have a client, British American Tobacco, for example, who's paying for their employees' fees. We have another company in Bangladesh, Triple Apparels, that is essentially covering 100% of the fees for their workers. And I think there's a very clear indication that with greater financial wellness and with the benefit of earned wage access, worker migration goes down. We fundamentally believe that with additional benefits, such as an employer covering the fee, we can even have a stronger impact on the business and the bottom line of employers. Thank you, Amrita.
Thank you, Toby. And I think that was actually our last question. So sorry, there's one more question. What should be a healthy migration rate for an RMG factory? That I will leave to the experts, Mr. Humayun and Mr. Mehrab. I would like to think the answer is 0, but obviously that may not be realistic. What do you guys think?
Let's say around 2 to 3% is manageable, because we know there are even more than 5-10% migration, some of the factories, some of the times. But if it is 2 to 3%, then it's manageable as a whole, I think.
I agree with Mr. Humayun. That's something that factory owners or the management can still cope with, and we can work around it. But once it increases or exceeds a certain percentage, it gets very difficult.
Great. That's really helpful. I think there's one more comment in the chat. It looks like they can spend their earnings whenever and run out of money immediately since their earnings is fixed. Actually, I want to address this because it's actually not exactly accurate. So workers can access their money, their earned wages, right? It's not the full month of wages. It's only those wages that they have already earned. And in fact, for our factories, we set a cap of 50%. So at any given time, workers cannot access more than 50% of their earned wages. This means that at the end of the month, when workers do get their full paycheck, they will have plenty of money left over to pay for any of their any outstanding needs. I think it's a good point to raise, but we do want the audience to rest assured that we have addressed this issue. We understand that we don't want workers spending their money on things that they maybe cannot afford. We want to make sure they have funds to pay for the things they need at the end of the month. So we have actually built that into our product construct to make sure that doesn't happen. But thank you for raising the issue. Do we have data on that workers are actually migrating due to the unavailability to access their earned money? I don't know that that's a cause of migration, but it's certainly by providing access, it can reduce migration. Mr. Mehrab, Mr. Wayne,
maybe Mehrab has some prime examples that he could share where workers, I think, have left the factory went to a different factory and actually wanted to come back. So Mehrab, maybe you can elaborate on this one.
This actually happened during the first Eid. So what happened was they got the salary and they got the bonuses and they were happy. They just left. They had actually disappeared for 2 to 3 months. We found out where some of these workers had gone to, and they eventually went off to other factories. But when they eventually came back, and we weren't sure at first why they came back, because we had already replaced them with other workers. But still, just for the sake of like a survey or just data, we just asked them why they came back. Some of them had actually mentioned wagely. They said that we want the access to our earned wage whenever we want, depending on however many days we've worked that month. We want that access. So that was very nice to hear from some workers say that, even though it was too late for them, but it was still nice to hear.
Amazing. That's a great story, Mr. Mehrab. I really appreciate you sharing that. We have another question from the audience. As an industry veteran, what are the challenges you are facing with workers except migration? So I guess non-worker migration issues. Maybe Mr. Humayun, do you want to take a stab at this one?
Sorry, what is the issue?
So the question is from the audience. As an industry veteran, what are the challenges you are facing with workers other than migration?
There are quite a few, like absenteeism, also one kind of challenges for us, inefficiency. So that is also one kind of challenge. So there are quite a few challenges is there apart from migration.
Depending on the areas, some areas actually have a shortage of workers. You just can't find workers around there anymore. Many people just want to do something different, because the RMG sector actually accommodates so many people in Bangladesh, but many of these people actually, it's come a time where they want to change their career paths. They want to try something else, and that catches on as well. You say to someone, and that person was possibly thinking of joining a factory, but he changes his mind as well. So we see a lot of people, especially in the Ghazipur area, who are moving away from factory-oriented jobs.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Super helpful. I don't see any more questions from the audience, so I think we can go ahead and call it a day. But Mr. Mehrab, Mr. Humayun, thank you so much for your time. I think we unfortunately lost Mr. Ashaab, but I think this was a great discussion. Thank you so much for being here. We're really, really excited to have been able to do this together. Sanjita, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Amrita, and thanks a lot to our panelists who made time today for this session and gave us really, really insightful information. I'm pretty sure these were very, very helpful to a lot of the attendees who are present with us here today. We have almost reached the end of our second Financial Wellness Meetup, and we do request our guests who have attended the session to participate in a very short survey that you can access using the QR code on screen, where we would like you to tell us what are the topics that you would like us to consider for the next meetups to come, and also give us feedback on Wagely or earned wage access if you have used or if you have not used it as of yet. And with that, I would be closing today's meetup, and I would like to thank our speakers, Mr. Humayun Salim from Khantex Fashions Limited, Mr. Mehrab Al Shaheen from International Classic Composite, Mr. Ashaab, who we lost due to power, from Giant Group Bangladesh. And thank you so much for sharing all the knowledge and experiences this evening. And of course, everyone who attended today, who were a part of this session today, thank you very much. We hope that this discussion from this session has provided our attendees with noteworthy insights, especially in dividing through the roles of various factors related to worker retention, worker migration, and turnover, and how financial wellness can play a positive role within the industry to face this situation. will not be keeping anyone any further, but thanking everyone for their time and for the questions and for the experience that you shared with us. I would just request our team member to take a small snapshot of this amazing panel that we have with us. And once that is done, I'll let everyone free, promise.
Thank you again,
Salman, could we
everyone.
have? Thank you so
Thank
much,
you for
Mr.
having
Mehrab.
us, and thank you for bringing Wagely to Bangladesh. And while the brains have made it work, the field and implementation team in Bangladesh have made it very easy for us. So a big shout out to them as well.
We are very grateful.
Thank you, Wesley. Thanks for your very good initiative for our industry. So hopefully we can work together in near future very closely. And we would like to work more closely with Wesley for our greater industry so that it's benefited for all of us. Thank you, Wesley. And thank you all.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mehrab.
Thank
All
you,
the best.
Tanvi.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Until next time, guys.
Until next time.
Next
Bye-bye.
time.
Bye.
Yes, bye.